Former Milwaukee radio man, Jay Sorgi. Jay, how long were you here at TMJ?
22 years over on Capitol Drive, doing everything from news and sports, Packers Radio Network, and a whole lot of other stuff.
22. I was going to estimate on the low side. I thought you were there for 75.
You're just trying to judge based on the hairline there?
No, man, you were there a long time.
True.
You miss Milwaukee? You're out in Philly now.
I am for family reasons. It's necessary for what we need. I miss Milwaukee like crazy. When half of your...
Is that a Milwaukee flag behind you?
Yep, that is. It's home.
There you go.
I mean, when half of your Instagram and Facebook feeds are people at Summerfest, it's like, really? Love it.
Yeah, it's been a good summer in Milwaukee. Certainly, that's one of the things that we try to convince people. 9 months of the year blow, but summer's pretty good. Although
Exactly.
you moved to Philly. It's not like you moved to. I don't know.
London
Chechnya.
or something like that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm talking to you like you're out of the United States, like you're on Mars or something.
Exactly.
Well, you've got a book. You wrote a book,
Mm-hmm.
and Milwaukee is the epicenter of the book. And this must have been an idea you had a while ago. Greater Than the Games is the name of the book, Volume 1, MKE 2028. So if you just see that, you think games. We call the games Olympics. MKE 2028. I mean, we've got like these conventions coming, and is Jay trying to tell us that Milwaukee could have the Olympics? And so there's this book, and I started reading, and I actually read much more than I thought I would.
Nice.
When people send you a book, it's like, yeah, I'll read the back cover and interview them. But I started reading this thing. Then you lose me in a good way. You lose me at when you start to throw the schedule out for what an Olympic, because then what I'm saying, Jay, is I just went and looked for every day about, you basically wrote a book about how the Olympics could work in Milwaukee. I'll get to like some of the specifics and everything, but where did this idea come from? Who, what, where, when, why? You're a radio guy.
It began when I was, of all things, it's a childhood dream that incredibly I could pursue as an adult while I was at WTMJ and doing all the things to be a husband and a dad. But it began with LA 84 when I was a kid. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is such a cool event. I'd never heard of the Olympics before. This is such a cool thing. The whole world comes and people play sports in your town. And when you're a kid, you dream of just ridiculous dreams. And you put them on paper and you stick them in a mental filing cabinet or a literal filing cabinet in a notebook or something.
Yeah.
So, of course, I did that with my hometown and the games and the idea of Green Bay and Madison and Chicago being nearby. College project comes around after Atlanta 96. I need to do a business school presentation. So all of a sudden, let's pull it out. Let's do a mock presentation as if we're going for the games. What the heck? Compare Atlanta 96 to what we had back with 84 and switch things around. Could Milwaukee pull it off in some ridiculous fashion and present it? Got an A in the project, put it back into the mental file cabinet again. Then in 2012 with London, a Wall Street Journal writer at the time, Sarah Germano, who's now at Financial Times, she came out with sort of tongue-in-cheek, but there was a lot of validity to her points that the next American city that should host the Olympic Games should be Milwaukee. We had some fun with it at the radio station. Okay, if it ever happened, who should light the torch? Bob Uecker, of course, was the one that most callers came out with. But then I pulled out the old project, and I'm like, let's compare it one more time just for giggles. Let's see, different sports could be here. You use Green Bay, you use Madison. Got a whole boatload more in Milwaukee than what people think we do. Chicago might need to do a little bit of help, but we've got something here. We might have something here. So again, for giggles, talked to a good friend of mine who's really close into the business community and in the government community, both in the city and at the state level. A man named Eric Paulson, who was on TMJ4 for numerous years, as well as working with BizStarts Milwaukee. And I showed him this. And he's like, dude, I can't believe I'm telling you this. You've got something here. It's not enough to say we could, at that moment, have gone right to the IOC in Switzerland and said, hey, we got an idea for the games, and they're like, okay, go do it. It obviously became something where let's test this out. Let's discern it. Let's not automatically say we should have the games in Milwaukee and Wisconsin. At no point did we say, okay, let's pull the trigger. Boom, it's right to do automatically. But we should test this. We should look at all the details of what it takes to really do the games right. And Boston 2024 was launching their bid at the time, and they had a boatload of issues because they took the attitude of, let's do the games and just sort of figure it out as you go. And that's where the ISC can come in and make you make a lot of mistakes in terms of what you need for your city and what's right. So let's study it before we would say, okay, let's do it. And a bunch of young Milwaukee business leaders joined me in these discernment sessions and in our brainstorming of how we could fix this problem about the games, as well as fixing issues in Milwaukee, like attacking issues of poverty and, substandard housing and our segregation issue back in my old hometown. And to see, can we re-engineer a city with how we would do games? Because it's so big, if you do it with right intentionality and right plans, you can fix things a lot if the ISC lets you. And that's the whole thing. And we went to talk to leaders like the head of the 96 games in Atlanta. We talked to some Packers executives, and they're like, you need to discern this. So we took it and ran with it.
So man, geez, you're writing a book about having the Olympics in Milwaukee. And like, all I wanted to let me just I'm so focused on the schedule. I'm just going to pull up day 3.
That's okay.
So day 3 at the Wisconsin Center, we got badminton. At the Milwaukee Arena, so it's Panther Arena, right? You change the name of some of these things,
right? Fiserv, unfortunately, would have to take 2.5 weeks off for Fiserv Forum, as an example.
Okay, they don't. Yeah. But handball would be there. Fiserv would be renamed something temporarily. You named it the Oscar Robertson Arena. They could hold basketball and some other stuff. Handball, obviously. The Peace Through Sports Center.
Yep.
Is this the new thing?
That's one of 2 new venues with seats.
Because I'm looking at all this stuff here. It's like the Fiserv Forum and the Al McGuire Center and Lakeshore Park they can do volleyball, and you've got a lot of built-in things. And for no other reason to buy Jay's book, I think you put out a video. You're just like, hey, it's like $9. Just whatever, just to see the schedule alone and like dream. Yeah. But you did put a lot of hard work in it. I'm not just saying that you wrote a schedule and made a book out of it. But I just find it interesting that as you're laying this out, there's so many places that, and I'll start there, that we could already use. I remember when Chicago was trying to have a bid, maybe you use Madison, and this would be a part of it too. Madison or Green Bay or Chicago, or it's just a nice, like when you think about it, you think Milwaukee, small town, Olympics. Yeah, right. But if you look at some of these places where the Olympics are held, they stretch out, their arms reach. It's not like you have to have everything in a 10-block radius. They use the full extent of the city, and it may have been tongue-in-cheek there. It's certainly not when you write a book on it, but there's a lot of pre-existing things that you could use. You would have to build a couple of other things. So what would be used, everything else, and what are you envisioning that would need to be built?
I guess we can start with the short list, which are the 2 venues that you would actually have to theoretically spend money on to build that would be permanent, that would have seats in it. And you better make sure that you've got legacies for it, which I think is one of the key cruxes. If you can't have the legacy for it, then you don't do it.
Because sometimes the Olympics will come to a place and then the city's like, we're actually worse off now.
Yep. I'll put it this way. When was the last time a major baseball game of any kind was played in the Athens, Greece Olympic Baseball Complex? Nothing since 2004. No. It's still sitting there, to my knowledge. You can't do that. No. So the short list would have been 2 venues, which we would have put in the Milwaukee Inner Harbor area that it was pretty well, I don't want to say desolate, but there was not a whole lot there at the time when we were discerning this. The Harbor District is doing a fantastic job of putting businesses, putting residential in that 1,000-acre area. But in that space, we would have put your big grand Olympic stadium. You would have put in the swimming complex. Those would have been the 2 new permanent venues with seats. We also would have had a cycling velodrome, which would have been turned over to Trek Bicycles, for example, to use as a testing facility and manufacturing, job creating for Milwaukee, along with a tennis stadium, which would have also been used for 3-on-3 basketball and convertible to that. You take down the seats, you sell them to high schools and colleges, and leave the courts there for the community. But the big two, the stadium and the swimming pool, are the ones that really typically get you when it comes to cost issues. And number one, okay, who's going to use the stadium afterward? I mean, you either, number one, make it big enough, and you have so much real estate, also residential, commercial real estate, to make up for the fact that you don't have enough hotel rooms to house the games, and you need to build an athlete's village. Well, that's prime real estate in that area. I mean, that could be a big moneymaker. So you build the housing, and especially if it's all privately invested housing, the profit you make off that could pay for those stadiums. It sounds ridiculous, but when you're talking about an 11-figure, like $10+ billion complex of all that's there, the stadium gets paid for by the profit from the residential and then some. So it can become a profit-making venture. Now, the big size is if you get the Packers back, say, for a game or two. You make the Packers, if they want to invest in the real estate piece, that becomes a profit opportunity for them to say, you know what? We get to outdo Dallas, New England, all the great mega teams that are, even like the Rams, that have one big real estate investment. We get two. We can make money off two of them. That secures your financial future if it's a profit-making venture. If it's not, then you don't do it. You could also be talking about the biggest capital expenditure that would be necessary for Marquette and UWM to come back to football. Milwaukee MLS, the National Women's Soccer League, have a franchise in Milwaukee. And you get the United States Olympic Committee to make it your home stadium. Get 10 events there a year. They become a real estate partner as well. They see the long-term benefit, but they need to invest in it. If they're going to take a cut of what the profit's going to be for an Olympic Games, they better darn well invest in your city and make permanent jobs.
Would that be, I'm going to say, the biggest hurdle? I'm not pun not intended, I guess.
It's true. It's
hurdling.
true.
Would that would have to be, I think, the biggest hurdle to get, because once you start spitballing like all the things that would work, then it's like, well, where do we put the stadium? Where do we put these athletes?
That's your biggest conundrum when trying to put together an Olympic Games. You have to have the real estate. You have to have the investors to be able to put into that real estate, because I mean, we know what's going on right now with the whole Brewers stadium renovation, let alone what happened with Fiserv Forum, what it took to get that done. You're telling me public dollars are going to pay for an Olympic stadium? Forget about it.
Oh yeah, that on arrival.
That's 10,000% fair.
Yeah,
you need to have it privately financed, which is why the residential piece and the commercial real estate piece becomes what pays for the stadium, and it's private. If you do that, okay. The only real public dollars you need, you're talking train transportation within the city and fanning out to Madison and Green Bay. That's really the biggest public expenditure that would be involved. That's what would need to be built. As for the rest, pick out some sports. I'll be able to tell you.
Boxing.
I believe we had the preliminaries at the UW Fieldhouse with the finals at the Wisconsin Center. You can get 10,000 people in there for
it. How about, I'm trying to think of other Olympic sports now? Not like I'm blank. Archery.
That you upgrade Hart Park in Wauwatosa and turn that little high school stadium into like a good quality 7,500 seat stadium. Now, for example, Paris 2024, they're sticking that in a park right by the Eiffel Tower. Much better for television. Makes total sense.
What do you mean? You got Left's Lucky Town in the background.
Love it. I love that. But if they want the Milwaukee skyline and Lake Michigan in the background, there's a little problem when you're conducting archery competitions. Wind. Can't do that. So we'll have it the Left's Lucky Town archery field.
Could you sail in the lake?
Absolutely. That was Chicago's plan for 2016. So you can easily do that. I'll throw a couple others at you. State Fair Park, you take the racetrack, which at the time really didn't have a whole lot of events going on. You convert that into an equestrian center for part of the racetrack, and other parts you have like your action sports, like your skateboarding, BMX biking, sport climbing, and the replacement that we would have had for surfing. As much as I love the idea of Sheboygan hosting surfing, that's not a great oceanic surfing venue. I mean, Paris is holding surfing in Tahiti, about 9,000 miles from the Olympic Village.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh, well then, yeah, you just slap 6 events in Milwaukee and do everything else everywhere else. Dude,
Right.
do the running part in Rome.
So we would have replaced, because they allow you to actually sort of localize what sports you should use. Well, one of the world's biggest participatory sports is bowling. How more Milwaukee can you get? But that at the State Fair Expo Center.
So what would be the biggest, I asked you, hurdle? Like, it sounds like the infrastructure for, like, because I was reading through your thing, and then there were places that I wouldn't have even thought of for Olympics, like down in Franklin where the Milkmen play. Oh, yeah, use that. It's not, there's enough. You don't think there might be, but there's, with upgrades, there's enough. Like, I think that would be my answer, but I'm asking you the question.
Oh, by far, that Olympic Harbor complex that we considered would be the biggest hurdle, because you have to find that level of size of investors. Now,
and what's like the easiest? What's the thing that's already there?
Well, I mean, you can roll the balls out at Fiserv Forum. You can do very similar at the convention center. You'd have to redo like the columns. You'd have to take that out and redo the roof to that, but it's very doable. The Milwaukee Arena, certainly it would be a great option for that. I mean,
rebuild the Bradley Center.
Yep, wouldn't be needed. Wouldn't need it. And like,
I know, I just missed the Bradley Center.
Oh, it was awesome. It was awesome. But you've also got, obviously, Miller Park, American Family Field, whatever you want to call it these days. That we would obviously held the baseball medal rounds for. But as we all know with concerts, you can put things on top of the field and play baseball shortly afterward. Gymnastics. The biggest gymnastics crowds in the history of the Olympic Games. The only thing you need to do is put air conditioning in the building. And, hey, Johnson Controls, well, can you put in a little bit of an AC system in the stadium? Great. Let's set it up. And that's where
you want to talk about legacy, like, yes, if the Olympics coming here alone, just to eliminate that closed roof BO smell that can take over Miller Park on a Saturday.
Love it.
That'd be the best.
Boom.
So you wrote your book, because I think of the guy, Keith Smith was the guy we would talk to that used to work at Disney, and then he was an NBA writer. And he's like, during COVID, he's like, wrote this big article about the NBA should play at Disney. And then they did. Boom. So it's like you have this idea that you've laid out a lot of the plans and answered a lot of the questions, and then you move on to the next thing? Or is there like a sliver of a percentage in your brain that thinks this could happen?
I'm personally moving on to the next thing just because my life sort of demanded it at the time and still does today. But it's also a situation where LA is hosting 2028. We're not going to be getting the Olympic Games in the United States for a Summer Games after that. I would estimate probably minimum 12 more years, probably closer to 16 years, 20 years after 2028. Well, number one, the Olympics love storylines. Wisconsin's 200th birthday is in 2048. What has to happen is, I think you look at what the sports scene is in Wisconsin, the overall venue layout, like what we did, which, by the way, would have been the first Olympics since 1932, where every event is within 2 hours of an athlete's village. You look at where you have open real estate. What's your economic situation? What's the government situation? There's no way you're getting the city and the state to agree right now on hosting an Olympic Games when there's so much that they can't agree on themselves. And
yeah, I didn't want to bring that up.
That's okay. That's okay. And that's why it never moved past theoretical.
Yeah.
But with some good reasons for saying, hey, there could be something here. I think those who are the young business leaders of today and who say are in college today, who are your big dreamers, this is the type of thing that maybe they can grab onto, stick in their memory bank, look at maybe 15 years down the road, take the temperature of Milwaukee and Wisconsin on the sports scene and so many other areas and be like, okay, do all the pieces fit? I think you also, though, have to look at the IOC in itself, because there are so many ethical, financial, and social responsibility issues that Olympics have brought about because of the way the IOC runs them. I mean, a bid situation, the ethics of it just come down to the individual people who were involved in what they do. But the financial piece, here's the killer of so many Olympic bids. The IOC demands that you basically, as a city, write a blank check to them. And they can add sports after they say, yeah, we've just picked you for the Olympic Games. And that can cause so many issues. For example, I didn't even get to this one yet. I'll give you a little preview of volume number 2, which hopefully will be coming out soon. Rio gained the Olympics for 2016 when Chicago lost the bid. It was 2009. A short time later, the IOC says, yeah, we're adding golf to the Olympics. You got to build a golf course. There were, I believe, 2 golf courses or something like that in all of Rio de Janeiro, none of which were probably better than Dretzka Park.
Yeah.
You got to build an Olympic caliber, really Grand Slam golf tournament caliber course like that for the Olympic Games. They just displace tens of thousands of people to do it, and no one ever plays the golf course anymore. So you're displacing people, and you're also blasting the budget open because the IOC says, oh, we want this now. You got to have cost certainty. And that, I think, is the biggest thing, where there comes to an agreement between the IOC and the city to say, we are going to have X budget. We'll agree on this. We'll agree to 10% cost overruns, perhaps, times inflation. That's as far as we're going. You want more? You pay for it, IOC. And that's part of why right now, after 2032 in Brisbane, they have no cities that are even close to saying, we want the games.
Yeah.
That's what I think people, whether it's Milwaukee or any place else, need to be like, we have to demand more from the IOC. Because if they do that, they can rebuild their demand, and all of a sudden they'll have cities that really want it. And I think we had a lot of solutions potentially to fixing a lot of the IOC issues to help be more budget conscious that could work. But they've got to be willing to play ball. And that's another bad pun, but it's true.
Is like, have you even done any work on what a winter games would look like?
I don't think.
Would it be a lot of the same or no?
I don't think we'd have the capability to build a 10,000-foot mountain in Jefferson County. That's your issue.
I think, what is the highest place in Wisconsin? It's like Tim Hill or Timus Hill.
Yeah.
It's 1,500 feet.
Yeah, the International Skiing Federation is not going to be able to. They would not have a world-class downhill course or anything close to it. So it would be one of those things where it's Denver for skiing, Milwaukee for the rest, and they just hold it in Denver anyway. That's why Salt Lake City's getting at least as a reasonable shot of winning 2030 for the Winter Games, because they've got it all already.
Yeah. Once you have it,
yep,
you have it again. One more, Jay. I think I think in a lot of people's minds, writing a book is something that they would like to do, and then you think would it take you 4 years? It feels like it's a very time-consuming, rewarding, grueling experience. What would you recommend? Not that I'm going to write a book, but what would you recommend to someone who thinks they can just sit down and write a book?
First thing I would definitely say is write what you know. Write about something that is going to fuel you so deeply that it's not a chore, but a desire for you to get this story out of your mind and your heart and your gut and get it onto paper, get it onto a Microsoft Word file, and to tell your story and to refine it and to understand it. And it took probably a good year and a half of writing after the life experience. And I mean, I don't know, unless Bart, for example, you're a world-class cook, are you going to go writing about like the great French dishes to cook? I would imagine.
I like ordering French fries.
Beautiful. But otherwise, you're probably going to talk about Wisconsin sports and a piece of that means something to you because it's what you know and it's what you care about. Write your passion, write what you love. And number two, get a great editor. Get a great editor. I had one in Liz Lincoln, who, by the way, does a book genre that's not mine, like my favorite, but she's a fantastic human being. She writes Milwaukee sports-related romance novels. So exactly. She's got a series of that, but
yeah, I think I need to get her on.
Go for it. But she's a great editor, and she did yeoman's work. Really patient with this idiot who didn't know how to write a book, and helped so much. So write what you know and care about, what's going to keep you driven, and find a great editor.
Jay, good to chat with you. The book's available on, are we just directing to Amazon or what?
It's on a lot of different online spots where you can buy books.
Wherever books are sold?
Yeah. You could say online, but yeah, Amazon's the best of them so far.
Like wherever you get your podcasts, it's like people know how to just type Jay Sorgi Olympic book. It'll come up.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, people know how to find stuff. Jay, good to talk to you, man. Hope you're doing good, and look forward to finding a reason to talk again.
You got it. I miss Milwaukee. We'll be back home soon.